we have something that others don't have. And that's a hope, because we believe in Jesus. It's a hope, it's a belief, and the biblical hope isn't like when you were a kid and you hoped you got this for Christmas. It's a knowing. It's a knowing, and it's an understanding that no matter what we're going through, no matter what life brings us, somehow when we come out the other side, we're going to, if we do it right, quotes, right, hopefully grow closer to Jesus, learn something that can be used through our life to help other people in the future. Grief is not a fun one to learn that process through and to go through that process in. But at the same time, some of you might be sitting here and you're right in the middle of grief, and you're like, oh, as a matter of fact, somebody after the first service this morning told me, they said, if I'd have known the service was on grief, I wouldn't have come. So you might be sitting there going, I wish I wouldn't have come. Or it might be that you've had grief in the past that maybe you haven't fully gone through, or it might be that you're sitting here going, well, this is going to be pointless because I'm not grieving anything and I'm good. But understand that in all reality, what I learned as I went through this is the process to overcome grief is really just the process to grow closer to Jesus. And so we can all learn from it, whether we're in the middle of grief that feels like it's, as you'll hear it described later, bone crushing, or whether it's something that we feel like we've gotten through, whether it's something that we've buried and we just don't really want to even dig up or talk about, or whether we feel like we're perfectly good and we don't have it. There will be something, because here's the reason why. I've in the past 5 or 6 years, over 2 years ago, I think the most recent one, I've done some races. Now I'm about 35 pounds over my race weight right now. But I've done a race up to as long as what's called a half Ironman. And a half Ironman is where you swim, you bike, and you run. And you swim 1.2 miles. And just to tell y'all how big of a deal that was to me at first was I got in the pool and I said, okay, I'm going to swim at about 85%, and I'm going to see how long I can go. And I was at the Y, and I swam from one end of the pool to the other, and I turned around and I swam back, and at the other end I was, I just felt like I was about to die already. And I had swam 50 yards, and I had to swim 2,150 yards, so that's a 43 times multiplier what I had to do. And I felt like I was already dying, and I was like, that's before the bike ride and the run. The bike is a 56-mile bike ride, and the run then, after you do all of that, is a 13.1-mile run. If you're like an absolute professional and amazing at this, you can do all of that in about 3.5 hours. If you're like me, just a normal person trying to survive and not die, you can do it in like maybe as quick as 6 to 7 hours. But it's a long time of continually moving forward. I tell you that because when I've done my half Ironman, I really prepped for them. Some of y'all knew me when I was training for them. I mean, it was 5 to 7 days a week, getting up, eating better than I normally do. I won't say eating great. My wife would call me a liar if I said that. But eating better than I normally do, training every day, 2 different subjects of the training, most days. And so when I got to race day, I was ready. I was prepared for the pain that I was going to go through. I was prepared for how hard it was going to be. And yes, it was hard, but at no moment did I think, wow, I haven't pushed through this already. And so I was ready for it. Now, on the counter side of that, I had a buddy call me up about 3 years ago, and I hadn't trained in probably 6 or 8 months at that point. And he said, hey, come out. I got a race coming this weekend. My buddy can't do it. I really don't want to do it by myself. Come do this sprint triathlon with me. So a sprint triathlon in comparison to a half Ironman is like nothing. You do like a 300-yard swim, which, not too bad. You do a 15-mile bike ride, which most people who are in decent shape, even average shape, I would say, maybe a little less than average shape, could ride a 15-mile bike ride. Now, if you aren't used to it, I'm going to be honest, buy the bike shorts before you do it, or else it hurts if you're not used to it. And then it's a 5K, which, if you've ever watched a 5K, plenty of different people can do a 5K. And so I thought, sure, I'll go do it. I am telling you, I felt like I was going to die. I think my wife was there for it, and she was like, wow, you didn't look nearly as fresh as Henry on that run. Henry being my friend who invited me to do it. And I was like, yeah, I felt like I was going to die. So I wasn't prepped. And so I say all that to say that whether you're in the midst of grief, whether you have no grief, whatever, if we can all follow these steps, and when I say all this, I'm talking to myself, then when hard times in life come, we'll be prepared. Not that it'll make it easy, but we won't have to think about how to accomplish it, because it'll just be a part of who we are. It'll be a part of what we've done, and it'll be a part of the preparation that's already been there. The foundation will be there to do it. So last year, I bought a new Bible. I don't have that one with me today. As you can see, I have one that doesn't even have the back cover on it. It's kind of, tattered a little bit and rough. But I learned something with that new Bible. A lot of new Bibles, you get a new Bible and you read it a little more. You start marking it up in different places than you've marked up your other Bibles. And it kind of reinvigorates you a little bit. This Bible didn't do that for me. What this Bible did for me is it made me recognize that from now on when I buy a Bible, I have to open it up and look at it first and make sure that the words aren't really small. Because at first I blamed it on Nathan and Leonard and the lighting in the church. I was like, I can't even read this thing without putting a light on it. And I blamed it on them until I was sitting at home reading it, and I'm like, no, okay, it's not them, it's just my eyes. And so that's what I learned with that new Bible is I'm going to have to get another new one, and it's going to have to be a little bit bigger print so I don't struggle so hard to read it. And that's just a funny little story of just to bring us back to levity. But going back to 1 Thessalonians 4:13 and the hope. The simple hope that we share is from a verse that we all know. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And it all comes back to God's love and being willing to share that with others and really dive in deep and showing others that we care for them by doing that. There are many different reasons that we grieve. Probably the most common that gets discussed is when we lose somebody that we love. Somebody passes away, they were part of our life in some shape, form, or fashion, and we know that we aren't going to get to have that interaction moving forward. Sometimes it's when we lose things, and by things I don't necessarily mean material possessions, but I mean maybe it's a promotion at work that we thought we should have gotten, or a job that we should have gotten, or whatever it might be. We lose out on something that we felt like we deserved in some shape, form, or fashion. And so there are many different ways that we experience grief, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to give a list of some. So it could be a child with sickness, cancer. It could be your own sickness. It could be the permanent ramifications of that sickness. It could be a loss of an 18-year-old sister totally unexpectedly. And within the same year, it could be the loss of your mother, who slowly died from cancer after fighting it for almost a decade. It could be a father who never showed up, whether it be for you as the mother or whether it be for your child. It could be an addiction that cripples you for a decade of your life that basically gets stolen. It can be some sort of autoimmune disease or health issue that's never ending. And it's just a constant onslaught and feels like it's just beating you down. It could be a family member going through that you're close with. It could be your parents' divorce. It could be your own divorce. It could be abuse from a previous relationship. It could be abuse from a parent. It could simply be feeling forgotten, like nobody sees you. It could be the loss of the ability to have a child due to different health matters. It could be a loss of your dad at 18 years old. It could be the loss of a lifelong best friend in your 40s when you were supposed to grow old together. Or it could be a loss of your mother less than a year later. All of those things that I just mentioned, every single one of them, is something that my immediate family has been through in some shape, form, or fashion. Those last three, though, the loss of the dad at 18, the loss of a best friend. And when I say best friend, I'm not talking about the one where you see them on Facebook and it's a post with 15 people and they're like, oh, look, all my besties. I'm talking about like a real best friend since childhood. and losing their mother a year later. These are all things that my wife Tara has been through in the last 2 years. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her story, and then we'll dig in to what it looks like and what it looked like for her on the other side.
I met Mary in the 5th grade, but we didn't actually become friends until the 7th. So we were just inseparable. We just did life together. Her parents divorced and she came and lived with my family for a year. We moved into adulthood and I started having babies and she started traveling and doing school, and we were there for all of the life's highs and lows. She was there when my dad passed when I was 18, and I saw her through miscarriages. So she called me when she was living in the Bahamas to say that she was really having trouble with her health, and that it had started to decline, and doctors were kind of having trouble pinpointing things. She ended up moving back to the States and trying to get just a deeper level of health care where she was, and just continued. Things just started kind of shutting down. So I'd gotten the call that she wasn't doing well, and I wanted to go, but it was also coinciding with the same weekend of our son getting married. So I had plans to leave immediately after the wedding to go to her. And on the drive home, I got service long enough to check my voicemails and found out that she had passed. So I just remember just this overwhelming, bone-crushing grief wave that hit me immediately. And it was just unlike anything I had ever felt before. So luckily, during all of the grief, and my mom had moved in with us and lived with us and had joined our family. And so she was a big support when it came to grieving Mary. She knew Mary, of course, because, she had raised her. We had grieved together before with my dad's passing, but she had also, lost her mom and dad as well, and she knew grief. She knew grief very well. So over the course of the next year with Mama, she definitely, her health started to decline. She had moved in with us because she wasn't in the best of health to begin with, and she very much integrated herself in everyone's lives, and the lives of my girls, and in my everyday. I couldn't cook without her over my shoulder giving me shortcuts and her opinions and coming over and stirring my pots of food. So last year on October 7th, I woke up to a banging on the ceiling, which is kind of our code in case Mama needed me and she couldn't get to her cell phone. She would just bang on the floor, and she knew that I would hear it. So I knew it was serious. And I went in and she told me that she was having some really bad pain. We called an ambulance. So I walked her down the hallway, and I didn't know that that was the last time that I was going to be able to give her a hug. I have a bulldog when I get into a hospital setting with somebody that I love, so I instantly kind of went in to be her advocate and established that I knew very well what her current state of health was and how to best help her. The surgeon came in and said, pulled me out to the side, and had said that she had a perforation, and due to her poor lung health and congestive heart failure that she had had in the past, that she wouldn't be a good candidate for surgery. He was basically saying that I needed to make a decision of whether or not I put her through the surgery and her potentially not recover, or just go ahead and let her pass. So we did have some lucid moments in the hospital during all of this, and I was able to ask her what she wished. She couldn't necessarily communicate, but she could nod, and I asked her if I was making the right decision to let her go, and she said yes. And so I told her I loved her, and that it was an honor to take care of her and be her daughter. And then I held her, and I told her to go dance with my dad. Prayer has just been a constant state that I feel like I've been in since Mary passed. I just pray my way through every single second of every day. And when I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm anxious, I pray. And when I miss her and miss my mama, I pray. And it's been calming. It's given me some peace. So I have a group of Bible study girls that immediately responded when they found out that Mama had passed, like so much so that they were texting me in the hospital saying, just come straight to me. And a large majority of those ladies had lost their moms. I think during the holidays, it was also really important for me to have some boundaries and know exactly how much I could do and how much I could commit to and show up for. I saw several verses that use the phrasing, catch my breath. He allows me to catch my breath. And I think that the grief sometimes feels like you can't come up for air, and God allows me to catch my breath in that moment of rest. So there's a verse in Psalms 56:8, and it's the Message version. I love that translation. And it says, you've kept track of my every toss and turn through the sleepless nights, each tear entered into your ledger, each ache written into your book. Throughout, all the dark times, God's always had me. He's always been there through every sleepless night and every moment of sadness and now joys and happiness and growth. He's there every step of the way. He's never left me. I think going through the holiday season, we have to just remember to be kind to ourselves. There's no time limit to our grief. I expect that I'm always going to be grieving. I'm learning to live life through grief.
It's a hard thing to watch your wife even share. I tried to watch it multiple times this week so I would become acclimated. But when you're in that type of spot, just as she just stated, he's always there. It's a matter of whether you're looking for him. There's a story of the prodigal son, and kind of the way that I like to restate it is that no matter how far we run from him, he's just, all we got to do is turn around. And he's waiting on us. He's waiting on us. She talked about multiple ways, Tara did, that she got through. And she mentioned multiple things. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I've never actually asked her this, but if I had to guess, and you asked her about her relationship with Jesus, I would say that it's probably better and closer now than it's ever been in her life. the opportunity, and I say that, and it sounds weird to say it, but to grieve means that you had the opportunity to love. It means that you had the opportunity to care about somebody enough that losing them hurts, or cared about something enough that losing out on that hurt. And if you've never grieved anything, then a couple of things are going on. You've either buried it or you just haven't lived. In all reality, you haven't lived and loved. So let's kind of touch base on some of the things she talked about. She talked about community. Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. That's really straightforward, really simple. We could read the verses before and after, but we don't really have to. That's pretty straightforward. If you want to live like Christ wants us to live, then we'll bear each other's burdens. When I was going through this, it reminded me of a message that I saw Nathan preach for the youth about 6 or 7 years ago at another campus. And he put on this book bag, and a few verses later it talks about carrying your load. And it's our own job to carry our load. Like, we're supposed to carry our own book bag. We're supposed to take care of ourselves if we're able to do our thing, pay our own bills, care for our own family, do those things. And then he started adding other stuff on, and it was like more book bags out on his arms and all this other weight. And he was talking about how that's representative of our burdens. And we're not meant to carry our burdens by ourselves. That's why part of what church is community. It's an opportunity to meet and to be with people who say that they believe something similar to you and are trying to move down the same path that you're moving down. And it gives you that opportunity. In the last couple of weeks with work, I've done some work with some people here at the church and gotten into some conversations with them and learned of the community that they have with other members of this church. And how close they are, and that they're there for each other in so many different ways. And it was kind of a cool thing to learn about somebody who I didn't know really well. And next we talk about rest, and that's Psalms 23, 1 through 4. Some of my favorite verses in the Bible, and it says, the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Those verses, if you read them all, there's so much. You could do a whole series of sermons just on those 4 verses. But it's about, no matter how deep we've gone, he's there with us. And it takes me back to a time in my life when my oldest son had cancer at 10, and it was the day that we found out. And I'd sat down and talked with him and told him that he had cancer, and as much as a 4-year-old could understand, a 10-year-old could understand, he tried. And later that night, I'd go to bed, and I look down my hallway, and I see the light on in his bedroom, and it's way past his bedtime, and start to get upset and make the walk down to the bedroom, and I swing open the door, getting ready to tear into him, and he's got his Bible open to these verses. But some of my favorite, and I don't know how much he understood what it said, but it was amazing to me that he was there in that moment. But the last few words of those verses, his rod and his staff, we often think of a rod as something that's like a correcting tool, but with a shepherd, it's really not. It's more of a guiding. It's keeping his sheep where they need to be, where they're safe, where they're in his presence, where they're close. And that's what I think of in those. And then we got gratitude and comfort. I'm not going to dig into the verse in 2 Corinthians there. If you want to write it down, at 2 Corinthians 1, 3 through 5. But Tara talked about, as she went through her grief with me, of just looking through moments that she could grab onto and be thankful for. Because sometimes we can get overwhelmed by the empty chair that's there, or the chair that's not even there at all that somebody should be sitting in. And I talked to you about, the fact that you grieve means that you loved. What's a different kind of love than to be blunt, I really love food, period. I love cheese. Tara and I went out to eat the other day, and we went to Longhorns, and I got an appetizer, and it was It was, what was it? Spinach artichoke dip. Yeah, covered with a crusted cheese. And then I got, if you know Longhorns, I got their Parmesan crusted chicken, which was covered in a crusted cheese. And then I got their macaroni and cheese, which is covered in a crusted cheese. Now, I really love macaroni and cheese. I really love cheese, period. But I don't think I would actually, now I would be upset, but I don't think I would actually cry if you took it away from me. I don't think I would grieve it for years to come if I could never have it again. I might talk about it a little bit. I probably would. But I wouldn't grieve it. Not like we saw, in all reality as Tara went through that, processing some of the moments. It wouldn't be bone crushing for me. And so to have that opportunity is something that you can be grateful for when you see the missing chair or the missing person. Think about why it matters and why that does bring the thoughts of grief. Scripture, 2 Timothy 3:16 says, all Scripture is God-breathed out by God and profitable for teaching and for reproof and for correction and for training in righteousness. I think I've probably seen Tara read, not that she didn't read it before, but probably read her Bible more in the last 2 years than ever before. More than me, probably, in all reality. And that's a little humbling to admit as I stand here in front of you, speaking. And then there's prayer, which just, I think she said every waking moment. Those weren't her exact words, but when she wakes up from a sleepless night, when she's feeling anxious, when she's hurting. Proverbs 3:5-8 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all of our ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. And I think it's interesting that it talks about refreshment to your bones when the words that she used to describe her grief was bone crushing. If we'll just lay in his arms and let him be who he wants to be to us, we'll make it through. And we'll be able to, on the other side, walk next to somebody else when they're going through it later. Philippians 4:6-7 talks about drawing close. It says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I truly believe that anytime we're going through something hard in life, whether it's anxiety, worry, grief, whatever it is, that this verse is a description of God calling us to him. And so in those moments, when we're feeling the grief, he's calling you. He wants to comfort you. He wants to be there. And I want to circle all the way back to the first verse that we talked about in 1 Thessalonians. Because regardless of our grief, not that it's to be set aside, but even in the midst of it, we have a hope. We have a hope because of Jesus. And as you go into this holiday season where grief can sometimes be like accentuated, it's not that you don't grieve other times of the year, but it's just sometimes feels bigger. I would challenge you, because we all know people who don't have hope in their grief, who don't have hope in their bad times, who haven't given their life to Jesus. And as I said earlier, while this is kind of a footprint that I think can be laid out for how to deal with grief, it's really how to draw closer to God. Because when you're going through it, he's calling you to him. He's begging you sometimes. We've got to share him. And I'll go as far as to say if we don't, we got to question like our belief or how much we understand it. And I'm not trying to be rude or mean when I say it, but I just think it's real. There's a guy named Penn and Teller. If you've ever heard of them, magicians. Penn Jillette is an avowed atheist. He has a podcast, and he talks about magic on it and talks about his, I still call it a faith belief. He might not like to, but he's got to have faith in something to believe that nothing or everything could come from nothing. I could go into that too pretty deep, but he had a guy after one of his shows bring him a Bible and give it to him. And he talked about it on his podcast, and then afterwards, everybody on the internet can say a lot of stuff, right? Because they aren't having to say it to anybody's face, and they're like bashing this guy and tearing him apart for giving Penn a Bible. How rude, how inconsiderate. He knows you're an atheist. He gave you that Bible. They kind of railed on. And then Penn comes back on his next podcast, and he actually brings it back up, and he says, hold on. He said, now, yes, I'm an atheist, and no, I don't believe what he believes. He said, but he gave me a Bible. I said, so let's take a step back and let's think about what he believes. He believes if I believe in Jesus, who this Bible is about, that I get to spend eternity in heaven with him. If I don't, then I burn in hell forever. So in reality, what better way for him to say I love you than to give me a Bible? And this is an atheist who understands that. So when you're meeting with those people who you love, who you don't know if they love Jesus, ignore what they say about don't talk about religion at family gatherings. It's too important. Jesus is too big. Everybody has to answer the question, who is Jesus to me? And that's whether they don't answer it or not, because not answering it in and of itself is an answer. And I know that I love those that are close to me too much to not tell them about him. Not that I'm perfect with it, don't get me wrong. But don't leave him in your back pocket. Share him with others. Share that hope. I don't want anybody that I love to go through this life. And I know that probably every generation says it, but man, we live in a jacked up world. And I have to look around sometimes and wonder how people do it without Jesus. Share him. If we do all these things and we draw closer to him, we won't be able to help but share him, because we'll know who he really is and what he's really about. So no matter where you are in your life, whether you're in the midst of the grief and you just need this to get as a playlist to kind of how to get through it, or whether you feel like you're good, draw close to him. Let him live his life through you, and share other people. Share with other people who Jesus is to you.